Well, welcome to the deep dive on the Intrepid TV as we cover the overview of Victor Winjira's article on the Kenyan-American healthcare deal that raised a great debate in Kenya.
That's a crucial point we're uncovering today. The data shows a significant trend with what we've been discussing. It's shaping up to be a deep dive worth taking.
And our able duo, Joel and Sophie, will take us through this article and shed more light. Over to you, Studio 2. Thank you, Jack and Lucy from Studio 1, and to you, viewer, welcome to Studio 2.
So you've sent us a whole stack of sources on what is, one of the most fraught decisions in recent Kenyan-American relations.
Absolutely. We're talking about a massive health funding agreement, one that promised billions.
And has now been, well, dramatically halted. It's a really high-stakes life and death kind of controversy.
It is. And today we're going to drill down into the two competing narratives that really drove this whole debate. On one side, you have this powerful argument for radical aid reform.
The one championed by Victor Winjira in his recent opinion piece.
Exactly. He's advocating for direct, efficient government-to-government funding.
And on the other side, we have the critical counter-arguments, the ones that ultimately led to the deal's suspension. And those are all centered on, the essential defense of national sovereignty and data security.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission here is to synthesize these two imperatives, to help you understand why some people see this deal as revolutionary, while others see it as just dangerously compromised.
It's a perfect storm of global development dilemmas, really. Is it possible to have efficient aid without, compromising a nation's control over its most sensitive information? That's the core tension we need to explore.
So let's start where Victor Winjira starts. The total failure of the historical aid model. For years, U.S. health funding to Kenya has been, well, let's just say inefficient.
Wildly inefficient. Winjira points out that the money has traditionally been channeled through this really convoluted, expensive network of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and other foreign partners.
And this is where the money just vanishes, according to his critique.
It is. He argues that billions have been allocated to Kenya, over decades through big programs like PEPFAR or the Global Fund. But the public consensus is that those funds rarely, if ever, translate into real improvements you can see.
At the level of a public hospital or a local clinic.
Exactly. You see public frustration growing because people know the money is there, but they just don't feel the benefit. Winjira says this inefficiency is systemic.
He paints a picture of aid becoming a subsidy for, foreign consultants and these big international NGO overheads.
And it's a compelling charge. The analysis we reviewed actually backs this up, noting that some studies have shown that when aid is routed this way, anywhere from 40 to 50% of the funds can get, siphoned off.
50%.
Up to 50%. In admin costs, logistics, consultant fees, before it even starts to have an impact on the ground, that kind of loss rate, it fuels legitimate outrage.
So the solution being proposed, the whole reason for this controversial new agreement, is this dramatic shift
to direct government-to-government funding.
Right.
And the political context here is crucial. This new model wasn't just born out of altruism. It was driven by a major audit of global health programs under the renewed Trump administration. They wanted to maximize direct impact and cut out the bureaucratic waste.
And Kenya was set to be the first big test case.
The first highly visible beneficiary of this redesigned system. The U.S. side wanted to cut the check directly, forcing accountability and bypassing what they saw as a wasteful system.
And for Kenya, that direct model means the funding could actually address these life and death realities without all the delays.
And these are not abstract things. Winjira lists the critical areas. We're talking about HIV treatment, specifically the supply chain for antiretrovirals, ARVs.
These are the life-sustaining drugs that suppress the HIV virus.
Life-sustaining. Without them, patients die quickly. Then you have maternal and child health, malaria programs, TB interventions, all critical.
Plus the basics like health worker training, medical supplies, infrastructure.
Right. Winjira's whole argument is basically, if the old system can't deliver ARVs efficiently, we have to try the new one, even if it's politically, uncomfortable.
Which is a pragmatic appeal. And that gets us right into his argument about the NGOs and, as he calls them, the cartels.
He's speaking directly to this very widely felt disillusionment with the whole development aid industry.
Okay, but if a 40% loss to overhead is the old norm, why is he so sure a new government pipeline won't just create new internal cartels? He seems to just dismiss that risk.
He does, but he does it rhetorically. He turns the criticism back on the opposition. He frames it as a choice between two evils, but one of them is actively starving patients right now.
So he's saying, look, We as Kenyans demand transparency, and we complain about middlemen.
And daily. Yet here we are, rejecting a model that is explicitly designed to bypass the traditional middleman. He basically calls the opposition hypocritical, saying they're trapped by their own political fears.
Here's where it gets really interesting and contentious. He connects this pushback directly to the current political climate.
He does. He suggests the opposition isn't really about the deal, but it's driven by anti-government sentiment aimed at President William Ruto.
He even calls it self-sabotage.
He goes that far, yes. His point is that opponents are risking essential, life-saving aid, the ARVs, the maternal support, just to score political points against the administration. For Winjira, it's a case of politics literally risking human lives.
And he poses a really tough question for the critics, which is, how can you run these essential programs?
Like monitoring HIV or tracking maternal health.
Without some knowledge of the population's needs, which, means you need some level of data exchange. It challenges the idea that any data sharing is automatically bad.
It's a very difficult question to answer, but this is exactly where we have to pivot and look at the counter-arguments because, Winjira's critique is itself flawed. Bypassing NGOs doesn't magically clean up the government that receives the money.
That is the undeniable truth, isn't it? The critique of direct funding is that it's no panacea for corruption. You mentioned it earlier, the fear of just shifting the cartels from external to internal. That fear is deeply rooted in Kenyan history.
Absolutely. The Kenyan government has faced multiple massive health sector corruption scandals. You just have to think back to the 2018 National Hospital Insurance Fund fraud, where billions were lost.
Or the mismanagement of COVID-19 funds. It was shocking.
Exactly. So critics point to these examples and say, why should we trust this administration with $2.5 billion directly when they have repeatedly failed to safeguard public funds?
And that fear of shifting corruption from foreign bureaucracy to internal mismanagement, it brings us to the central deal-breaking issue, data privacy.
This is the most crucial risk, and it's the reason the entire deal was suspended. While Winjira claimed there were no credible sources showing forced data handover, the reality is the fear was serious enough for the Kenyan High Court to step in.
Walk us through that, because it was a dramatic move.
It was. The High Court suspended the deal, and just to underline the scale, we're talking about a deal worth between $1.6 and $2.5 billion on December 11th, 2025. And this suspension was based on a petition from a consumer rights group, COFEC.
The Consumers Federation of Kenya. And what was their specific legal argument?
They argued that the agreement could expose incredibly sensitive health data to U.S. access. I mean, we are talking about detailed records, HIV status, ARV treatments, TB interventions, private maternal health records.
Things you would never want made public.
Never. COFEC's core legal point was that allowing this kind of access without verifiable Kenyan regulatory oversight would violate a key national law, the 2019 Data Protection Act.
So this wasn't just an ideological fight. It was a legal challenge about protecting fundamental rights.
Yeah.
What was it in the deal that specifically triggered that 2019 act?
The documents we have suggest the deal aims for real-time data sharing.
Real-time.
That specific phrase, real-time, is what set off all the alarm bells for privacy advocates and the courts.
Because real-time implies more than just summary statistics. It implies granular, dynamic access to the data as it's generated.
Precisely. Critics worry that this level of access enables potential surveillance, or maybe even more likely, commercial exploitation.
Oh, so?
Well, the fear is amplified because these global health data systems often involve partnerships with huge U.S. tech firms, think Google or Microsoft, who manage the infrastructure.
Right.
So sharing sensitive health data with a government that relies on commercial tech partners, it just opens up a whole can of worms. The data could be used for purposes far beyond just tracking ARV distribution.
It sounds a lot like the global data disputes we see all the time, like between the EU and the US over things like GDPR. The lack of equivalent privacy protections is always the sticking point.
And that's exactly the tension Kenya is facing now, just domestically. If the goal is truly efficient aid, critics are asking why the lack of transparent, verifiable safeguards on this data.
Which takes us to this broader, more philosophical tension over sovereignty and sustainability.
Right. When Winjira throws down the gauntlet, he challenges Kenyans. If you reject this aid, are you actually prepared to fund your own health system independently?
It sounds like a powerful argument, but the reality on the ground makes that almost impossible right now. The analysis confirms Kenya's health budget is chronically underfunded.
Dramatically underfunded. Kenya spends only about 4 to 5% of its GDP on health. That is less than a third of the target set by the African Union back in 2001, the Abuja Declaration.
Which called for 15% of the national budget.
15%. With that kind of huge budgetary gap, donor aid isn't just a nice to have. It's essential for keeping major public health programs from collapsing.
So the critics aren't actually rejecting the help, they're rejecting the terms.
Exactly. They are demanding stronger privacy clauses and much greater transparency before they commit to a deal that compromises national control over some of the most intimate data held on their citizens.
So what does this all mean for you as you're trying to make sense of this high-stakes standoff?
It means the court's intervention on data confirms a vital global principle. Fundamental digital rights cannot just be traded for operational efficiency. Not even when lives literally hang in the balance.
So Winjira was right that the old system was wasteful.
He was. But the critics were equally right that the new system posed an unacceptable new risk to privacy and national security. The deal is stuck between the need to treat patients and a need to protect citizens.
It's the ultimate rock in a hard place. They desperately need the money for the ARVs, but they cannot legally or ethically give up control over sensitive health data without ironclad safeguards.
And that brings us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. It's about the long-term solution. If reforming global health aid really does require real-time data to prove it's working, as the U.S. insists, then the fundamental question becomes this.
Should nations that depend on this aid, like Kenya, first prioritize massive, independent investment in their own sovereign, unexploitable national data infrastructure?
Exactly. Before accepting the foreign assistance, they need to build a system that guarantees accountability for all funds, whether from donors or local taxes, while shielding their citizens' fundamental right to privacy. It's an expensive, difficult, long-term project, but it might be the only way to finally break this cycle of aid dependency, risk, and compromise.